Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
I am sat in the salubrious, and I do mean salubrious, surroundings of the back of a tent. My view as it stands at the moment is an enterprise rent-a-van filled with barbecue goods, and this is really truly the behind the scenes of the game fair. And rather wonderfully, rather than just sort of listening to me and Richard and Callum whiffle away, we've decided to take the opportunity, because we are here at the game fair, to go and talk to some of the people who we think you're going to want to hear. And most importantly, today, I'm speaking to the wonderful Meg and the wonderful Lizzie from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, which more observant listeners may have noticed that I do rather wax lyrically about. Not Megan and Lizzie, I'm obviously talking about the GWCT, although, to be fair, it would be very easy to wax lyrical about them. So, Lizzie, tell me, what is your role with the Trust and what do you do?
So I'm an ecologist within the Wetlands Department, and I also have a slight advisory role where I run one of our farmer clusters as well.
Cool. Megan, what is it that you actually do?
So I'm the Farmland Biodiversity Advisor within the advisory team, and my main role is facilitating 2 of the 3 farmer clusters within the Martin Down Farmer Supercluster, so the Allenford and the Martin Down Farmer Cluster. And I also have I work with land managers, farmers, gamekeepers as advisory clients, where I go to their farms and estates and advise them on the ground what they should be doing.
Okay, so now I'm very closely allied with the High Suffolk Farm Cluster, and we are funded in rather bizarre ways, largely through private funding, courtesy of Lens, and therefore Nestle do give us a lot of support. Megan, can you tell me and explain as to how, you've got them historically the oldest and the largest cluster groups on use? How do you pay the bills?
Well, that is a very interesting question. So the farmer cluster concept came from GWCT, and it came from the Marlborough Downs Nature Improvement Area. And when that was started, then 5 farmer clusters were established, and one of those was the Allenford Farmer Cluster, and that is one of the first founding ones, which is one of mine. That's 7,500 hectares, and the other one is Martin Down, and that's 5,500 hectares. And when they were formed, the farmers came together. They decided that they didn't want to go through CountrySlide stewardship facilitation funding. They wanted it to be truly bottom up. So they made the decisions of what they were going to do and how they're going to do it. So they make a contribution based on their hectareage of £2 per hectare, which covers some of my time. I do all of the monitoring, surveying and data analysis, events, training. But we also, as GWCT, I have a charitable trust donor who specifically gives money to my role for the farmer cluster work. And then I find pots of money here, there and everywhere where I can gather in money from FIPL or other places, but no private funding as of yet.
Okay. So, Lizzie, how is talk to me about your cluster and how that is funded and why it needs additional funding, I suppose.
Yeah, so my farmer cluster is the Avon Valley Farmer Cluster. We run all the way down the sort of Hampshire Avon, from kind of Salisbury down to Bournemouth almost. There's a few gaps along the way. And we are funded through CountrySlide stewardship facilitation funding. So it is the sort of more formal way of getting that funding. And that funding pays for my time to organise events and run courses and bring in different experts. But it is quite limited, that funding. It's very much only one-to-many. It only funds the training and the meetings and my time to organise that. It doesn't actually fund any monitoring or any habitat works or anything specific like that. So we then, a bit like Megan as well, we need to bring in different areas of funding to cover specific projects. And if we actually want to do stuff, as opposed to talking about doing stuff, we have to bring in different pots of money to be able to do that.
Okay, one of the questions I suppose perhaps people might have, okay, what is a farm cluster, Lizzie, and why are they better than just farmers ploughing their own furrow, to pardon the pun, and going and focusing on their own nature recovery and habitat management, conservation management on their own farms? What's the power of the cluster?
So I think there's two kind of main areas of this, and I think a big part of it is forming that little community, because farming can be quite isolating and quite lonely. You'd expect people to see their neighbours all the time, but actually, you know, sometimes I'll have events and people haven't seen each other in years. So just forming that little community can be really, really important. And it sort of creates a bit of a safe space to talk about things and ask for advice. I try and do as much as I can of sort of peer-to-peer advice rather than me turning up and telling people what to do. It's like, oh, your neighbour's been doing this for a couple of years. Why don't you go see what they've done? And it creates that little, safe space community and a little bit of sort of what we call lapwing envy as well sometimes. So if someone's got 5 pairs of lapwing and they found out, you know, their neighbour's got 6 pairs, they're like, oh, well, maybe I'll try and get 6 pairs next year. And it's that sort of community side of things I think is really important.
Yeah, the WhatsApp goes nuts, doesn't it?
Do you know, it's one of the things I found is that, you know, with my line of work, is that when you get buy-in from farmers, and, you know, perhaps before I started work with them, I'd go and have conversations and they go, oh, yeah, I've got little brown jobs in my edges. I don't know what they are. And then you perhaps might say, they perhaps might go out on the big farmland bird count, and then they suddenly realise they've got X number of linnets and X number of yellowhammers. And that competitive nature of farmers, you know, how they do look over the hedge at their neighbours and have a look at their crops. I've found exactly the self-same thing, is that they are so competitive, and that I was starting to get that. Look at my goldfinches then.
We've got it at the moment.
Rights. Yeah. So that sort of reigniting that spirit of competitiveness of one against the other. Do you think, Megan, that's actually almost one of the positives then of a cluster?
Yeah, I love it. I love dropping into the WhatsApp group saying, oh, I've just heard a quail on so-and-so's farm, and then everybody goes out like trying to hear one. And now we've seem to have quail on every single farm, which is great. And we've created an app as well, which then they can pinpoint. Every member's got access to the app, and they can pinpoint on there.
So sorry, you said you've got quail on every farm?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that, because, you know, I'm quail. Yeah. I thought we were all grey partridge fanatics.
Oh, yeah. These are the only migratory species of game birds, and they come over at this time, well, in the spring, but they cool generally from June to July, and they have quite a distinctive call, and it says wet my lips. So you don't generally see them, but you hear them.
Yeah.
They like pasture land, and, you know, they love beetle banks. So I was out doing a butterfly survey last week on one of the farms within the cluster and heard it, put it out, and then everybody went out to listen. And it's harvest. There are a lot of people out and about at the moment, and they've heard them. So it's been great to get that feedback. And that's what then spurs people on, because they want to know, why have you got it and I haven't then? And going back to your question about farmer clusters and what the importance is, it's bigger, better, more joined up. You know, just to quote Lawton, if you do things in isolation and that population dies in a small area on a reserve or within an island, that's it's gone. And the beauty of the Martin Down Farmer Supercluster is that in the middle is the National Nature Reserve, Martin Down. And we have created corridors going out from that pristine chalk downland that's never been cultivated, and given habitats and nesting areas of those species that are iconic there on farmland. And you can have farming and nature together.
Yeah. I think that's the thing to get, is that both are compatible. And I think that's the biggest challenge. Now, obviously, one of the birds that has been massively impacted by our modern farming practices are those in your wetland areas. So talk me through. So Megan's got quail. What are you going to go and top trump her with, Lizzie, that you've got?
So our main species are waders, so breeding lapwing and breeding redshank. They're two fantastic species. Lapwing's a brilliant species. You can speak to any farmer about lapwing and they'll remember peewits, back when they were kids, all through the fields. So that's been a really, really nice one to work with. So we've had quite a successful lapwing recovery project where we've kind of doubled our number of breeding lapwing over the last nearly 10 years now, and we're now at quite a stable population. And I think through the lapwing work, we started to notice how important our redshank were as well. And they get a little bit forgotten about because they're not quite as iconic as lapwing, but they're fantastic birds. And those have been doing really well as well. So one of the things we really do within our cluster, and I'm sure they do with lots of others, is we really involve the keepers who are in place on a number of the estates, and they can make a huge difference to the work, especially with any kind of ground nesting species, because that predator management is hugely important.
That's very interesting, because I wrote a piece for Scribehound a few weeks ago that was highlighting the research done at Upper Otterburn, and they were looking at their, obviously, upland wader species. And when they removed the predator control, I mean, it was literally like those species fell off a cliff. We're talking sort of 80+%, I think it was for redshank. So that integral role that the keeper plays, is that something that you would concur down on the Avon?
100%. The places where we have been able to achieve wader recovery is where there is timely, well-placed, specific, legal, lethal predator management, and non-lethal as well. So we will use temporary electric fencing alongside the lethal control to make sure that we're covering every base. We've got a whole suite of predators down there, protected and non-protected. So we try and do our best, to make things work for these species with all of those species present.
Is there a sort of enemy number? Sorry, my dog has suddenly decided to nearly pull out my cable. You see, this is what you get when you sit outside a budget renter van at the game fair. What's enemy number one for your waders, would you say, or is that just a bit too generalistic?
So there's two key periods. There's actually three key periods. There's when birds are turning up and setting up territory. That's a period that gets a little bit forgotten about, because the more disturbed they are at that point, they're maybe less likely to nest in optimum habitat. So we advocate for predator control as early as possible, so that there's not foxes around essentially when they're setting up territory, because they are the main predator at the start of a nesting season. So while the birds are on eggs, the main nest predator tends to be foxes. That is the main one. But that does tend to shift when the birds then hatch, and you've got chicks running around, and that tends to be, you tend to see more avian predation at that stage. So that's where having tip-top habitat is really good, and you can create good areas of cover for chicks at that point.
And Lizzie, you've been able to go and plot the successes and the returns, so that you've got now, how many years of data have you got there?
So we have 5 very good years of data, while we had a big EU Life project running alongside of it. Since then, it's a little bit more patchy, where we don't have the funding coming in to do the really detailed monitoring. But we know that our lapwing have gone from about 62 pairs to about 120, and we're quite stable there. And our redshank have gone from about 20 to about 35. And again, we're quite stable at that. But what's been really nice is where we do quite detailed chick monitoring, we know that we've got enough chicks fledging to increase our population, and we start to see chicks coming back in following years and breeding as well. What we've also seen from our redshank, which is really nice, is chicks going off into other populations locally across Hampshire. So that's really good movement between those populations, and we know that we're supporting other sites, not just our own.
And so that might shifting off, because one of the things, our focus species for the High Suffolk cluster is the grey partridge and the turtle dove. Now, the turtle dove, we never quite obviously know what's going to happen to them, because they are migrating, and who knows where the heck they're going to end up and what might happen in their travels. But with our grey partridges, and what we've concentrated on there is that we know where those areas are, and then we have been able, because of the size of the cluster, we've been able to widen those areas where we know that they aren't, but where they might want to then move off into. Would you say that's one of the integral importances of a cluster, is the fact that you can enable population increase because you are putting the same habitats and the same protection from predators and the same food sources out where they can go into. It's not that they get to a certain number, get to a certain sustainability level, move out, and then they die. That seems to be the problem. Is that one of the other killer positives of a cluster?
Yeah, that's the idea. So we've got hotspot sites where our raiders are doing really well, and then we're trying to join them up and give them more areas where they can move into. Another great thing about the cluster as well is it's hard sometimes to motivate someone to do something for a species that they don't currently have. But if they can come to a meeting and they can see, oh, the group has X number of redshank, maybe actually it's worth me giving it a go. Because if they don't know they're right next door, then they're less likely to put the effort in to get the habitats right for that species to come in. So and some years, they don't always nest the same places. So some years they might not have any lapwing on their farm, but knowing that the population is still doing well, that's enough to keep that motivation to keep going next year.
Okay. So, Megan, I whinge endlessly, some may say, I would say just justifiably, on CountrySlide about how the challenges of the current government they've wanted to change, address, tweak, decimate, /cut, /refocus funding through DEFRA. What are the challenges that you think are facing not only your own cluster but wider nature recovery on farmland? What are the positives that could possibly come out of it, and what are the negatives of what this government has done?
It does come across to me that there's a disconnect between government and those who are managing the countryside. There seems to be a lack of understanding and appreciation. Funding being cut last minute, it creates a lot of uncertainty, and trust is lost. That is an issue. And I've worked with farmers and land managers my whole career, and consistency is key. So if you create something, take it away, are they likely to then re-engage afterwards? And I've got farmers that have never been in stewardship because they just want to keep away from it and rather do it their own way and know that it'll still deliver, but they can manage it how they wish.
That's so therefore they've never been in stewardship at all because they almost foresaw that there would be a government like this
is
one.
Back at ELS stage.
Yeah. Okay.
So never.
So are they slightly going, haha, told you so?
Yeah, but then that particular one then threw his hat in the ring for SFI and managed to get it in just got it in. So that was a real win. I just hope that it goes smoothly. But we're seeing species recovery across the cluster. And going back to what you're saying, the benefits of the cluster is that we can connect stewardship across farm boundaries, and that's what we're doing, mapping it to see where the opportunities are, and then hopefully, when these new agreements come out, then we can fill the gaps. But I've always said you can't farm greenly if you're in the red.
No, that's one of my absolute bugbears is that you can't expect. I mean, we've got, Lizzie, a legally binding piece of legislation, which is we have got to halt, or government has got to halt, biodiversity decline by 2030. Now, you're showing great results on your cluster, but move 10 miles down the road off your cluster, ain't happening, is it? I mean, is stopping biodiversity decline by 2030 just a silly pipe dream number?
Or it's not being recorded. That's the other issue.
And
how it's recorded, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. So we don't even know. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, how it's being recorded, again, within my funding through my cluster, I don't actually get any funding for monitoring.
No.
So GWCT, in-house pay for some of it. I get some grants, some research grants in for some of it. But it's hard to then even record that recovery. But then I still also get asked for evidence of the recovery to go alongside, the work that we're doing. And you think, well, I can just about provide that, but it's hard. And then you wonder, there might be other great projects going on that aren't getting any monitoring, and so actually recording that recovery is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's the joy of my cluster, is that I can go and do the monitoring and track those trends. And we can say that there's a 125% increase of grey partridges, there's a 120% increase of corn buntings, there's 58% increase of species diversity of butterflies.
Yeah. Do you think you're slightly an anomaly here? Because, you are, at the GWCT, is a trust, a charity, which is ostensibly about trying to stop nature from declining. And we have others, let's name them, the RSPB, the Wildlife Trust. The narrative that you've spoken to me is all about positives. Look, we've put these measures in place, and look, we've achieved these successes. Do you think it's actually a bit damaging that a lot of the words and pictures that seem to come from those two organisations, and I'm not trying to character assassinate them here, but is largely this many insects are dead, we haven't got this many species, we haven't got this has declined, because their methodology of raising money is trying to go and pull on heartstrings because of disaster. Whereas what you're saying is that if we put these measures in place, we can achieve success. Do you think actually, in a way, that painting that picture, Lizzie, of it's always doom and gloom, is actually almost led us to this position where the Labour government have reached this decision saying, well, the SFI elms, what a waste of time, because everything's dead, because that's what the RSPB told me. Do you think that's almost the problem?
Quite possibly. I mean, I don't think I would have been able to achieve much of the success we saw through the waders by being completely doom and gloom. I think, when I hold meetings, I try and be as realistic but as positive as I can be, because if I'm asking someone to be out there as many nights as they can a week shooting foxes, but then I only give them doom and gloom, they're not going to keep doing that. So we need to be positive, and we need to show what can be done. So I spend quite a bit of time going off to other groups who are interested in doing wader recovery and talking about how you can do it. And it's normally received really well, what can be done. So we do need to be positive, because otherwise people will think, well, what is the point of even bothering?
What do you think about that, Megan?
I think I'm lucky because I've got a couple of really good farmers that are happy to engage and have a very open gate policy. So they're happy for me to bring people on, come and have a look, come and look at this. This is what we've done. We've made a turtle dove splash, and now we've got turtle doves drinking there every day. So I think you've just got to show people what we've got and be proud. But there is a concern then if you show your deck, then you could get a restriction, so it kind of...
Patrick Barker, who sort of more or less runs our cluster, we have a rather loose cabal of us who sort of run the High Suffolk Farm Cluster. But he came out with a brilliant line, thankfully, on TV with me, where he was saying that until such point that you can put a cash value on a yellowhammer, farmers aren't necessarily going to put them top and front of their priority list. Farming's under great financial pressures. We've got announcements all the time that, Roger said this morning in the briefing that there was 3,000 farms had gone under, according, or I think it was actually Nick, wasn't it? The boss man, he said that 3,000 farms have gone bust. We've got clearly farm gate prices are falling. We're apparently going to have, each family is going to be spending £275 a year more on food next year, but that's not going to be seen coming into the farmers. How on earth do you two, let's ask you first, Megan, how do you keep your farmers focused on nature when there isn't any money for nature, and when the stuff that they actually grow, the stuff that feeds us, is getting paid bottom dollar? How do you keep them motivated?
That's $1 million question. It's quite an interesting one, though, because I'm the national lead for clusters within GWCT. So I speak, like Lizzie does, to other clusters, or go and meet them and say, this is what you could do, this is what we've done if you want to set one up. And I got asked last week, so what do they get out of it? Why are they paying £2 a hectare? What financial gain do they get from that? So he was quite confused why we did it, because there was no monetary value.
Yeah.
We can't go back to the farmers. It's because they actually really care. And I think that's one thing. I did a talk to Hampshire Ornithological Society, and I think it's a general consensus that farmers are the bad guys. They don't care. They don't know what they've got, and but it's complete opposite. And that's what I see. There's a lot of pride in that they want to do the right thing, but they need people to show them the direction and to tweak things, and then you see the species recovery, where we and Lizzie and I then report back to the farmer, this is what you've got. If you get to the point where that stewardship's coming out of their agreement, do they keep it or do they get rid of it and put it back into production? I can't answer that for them. That's the choice they're going to have to make themselves.
What about you, Lizzie? What do you think?
Sorry, pause you for 1 second. I need you to sign a book.
Yes.
This is the most wanky celebrity thing.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry. Were you still recording? Yeah, right.
Did you write a book?
So, what? What's that?
Did you write a book?
Do you know? Have you not heard?
No.
Yeah, it's called Words from the Hedge.
Was that when you were in Mongolia?
That's when I was in Mongolia. I just, this is the second edition. Hold on. You see, now, if I was a really sad sort of, authory type individual, what I would do is I'd carry... Oh, look, I've got a Sharpie
in his pocket.
Hold on, I'll put my mic
You've got
down.
names to write down as well.
Who's it for?
Ian, I-A-N.
I-A-N.
Haddon, D-D-O-N.
To Ian. Right, so, there we go. This is real world scenario here. The spaniel is trying to go and mess up the cables, and...
Pint in one hand, microphone in the other.
And the third person ever has bought a book. Isn't that wonderful? Actually, that's a complete lie. Have you read my book, Megan?
I didn't even know you'd written one. I'm joking.
Lizzie, have you read my book?
Not yet. No.
I'm going to get a
Okay,
signed copy for this, I think. That's what we should
this
get.
Is the
That's
problem.
a payment.
You don't understand. See, you're all doing all this lovely stuff with, your wildlife and going, oh, look, I've managed to recover this project. I, on the other hand, make hedges fall over and write books about it, and you don't actually
I've got a
worship
question
me
for
like
you.
a god.
I've got a question
Yes.
about hedges.
You've got a question about... Okay, that's a good idea.
Let's flip the table.
You know.
So I was doing a butterfly survey last week, and I thought of you as I was walking up one section, 100 metres, 145 individual butterflies in that part of the transect. It was a lot of bramble and wild clematis. And I thought, this is a bloody good hedge, but I don't think you would like it very much.
Well, it's funny you say that, because around in about 2-3 weeks' time, I start doing hedgerow management plans. Goldie and I start doing them. And it's back to your point about data being king, and that you don't, until you look at it and you assess it properly. We're not doing it so much in the scientific, we're doing it from a very much practical conservation angle. But we do hedgerow management plans. So what we'll do is that if you look at the whole hedgerow network on a farm, or indeed on a cluster, you can see, what's missing as well. So when you write that down, so if you've got a great big bank of bramble, and that's the only bank of bramble on a farm, usually if I just saw a great big bank of bramble that was choking out a hedge, I'd probably go, I'll coppice that out because it will come back anyway. But if it is on 4 sides of a field, or it's, how many angles of hedge you got around the field, if that is that only one bit in there which is awash with bramble, and it's got some clematis, and it's got all the stuff that we'd usually say, that's just choking that out, or that tree has got a great big load of ivy on it, we can then, by looking at it, we can say, leave that alone. Because we're doing hedgerow management for improving biodiversity. And so therefore, only by looking at the hedgerow network as a whole can you say, actually that deserves to stay, that needs to stay there, because, and that's also when we look around, we're not just looking at hedgerows, we're looking at species we might see. Let's think, we're seeing turtle doves we're seeing feeding out. Great, there's a fledged brood there. We might think, why is that there? And you look around you and you see you've got that scratty, almost belt of trees with a load of crap underneath it, and you think, that's the reason why, because that's what they want. And I use a term called a mosaic of hedges, and that is enabled to maintain that mosaic by doing management planning. So you guys are looking at a whole landscape suite. Goldie and I are looking largely at the hedgerow and its immediate margin. So therefore, you're quite right. If it was in isolation and someone said, I want to get that hedgerow back to being a hedgerow, I'd probably say, well, flail the bejesus out of all that old invasive crap. But if it was the only bit around the field, I'd leave it well alone, which is not very good for our bank balance because we don't get paid for leaving stuff alone. But it would be the right thing to do as being hedge layers who are conservationists, or are we conservationists who are hedge layers? I don't know. I mean, what do you see yourself as, Lizzie? Your job title, your name badge says ecologist, right? What does an ecologist mean? What do you actually think your job is? If you're going to say to someone, what do I really do? What's your job? What's your job about?
So, very varied. So, I am an ecologist in the sense that I do a lot of very detailed survey work. I do a lot of very targeted tagging work. That's a big part of my job, trying to investigate exactly where birds go and why they use certain habitats. But I think almost the more important part of it is how I then communicate it to people and people who can do something about it. So all of the tagging work I do directly goes into the conservation of that species and to the people who can do something about that species. So I don't know if that really answers the question.
Well, no, it does. I mean, I know, Megan, your job a lot. You've got a lot of communicating, isn't it? It is a huge amount of your role. And, I mean, I'm a bloke, right? And I'm also fairly verbose. I'm not a shrinking violet. Have you had to train yourself to be slightly the effervescent, come on, we're going to go and over the top, lads? You've got a swagger stick. If you were around in 1915, you'd have been leading people over the top to their death. Is that something you've had to almost train yourself to do?
Yeah, I think you do. And it's like, I see it as a challenge, I think. And also, I've always worked in this sector, and you kind of have to prove yourself before you get them on board, and then when you've got them, you got them. So, And I love creating that community, like Lizzie was saying, is I know I can go into every farmhouse and have a cup of tea. I know their children, I know their grandchildren, or who's working, what's happening. And, it's building that relationship that I really enjoy. I do spend a lot of time on my own, though, walking the fields and doing lots of surveys of bumblebees, corn buntings, grey partridge, it's a lot. But it's also then feeding that back and then encouraging them to do more.
If you were able, Lizzie, to go and have the ear of Steve Reed, DEFRA Minister, and said, listen, mate, this is what we need, and this is how you can come out smelling of roses, what would you say to him?
That's quite a big question. We need to listen to people more. So I know we talk about bottom up, but it's not necessarily giving all the power to it, but it's listening to people and what they're interested in, what they're motivated by, and how they want to go about doing it. We need more flexibility. There needs to be some sort of targets and target areas and those kind of things, but it needs to be flexible with on the ground, like what you were saying with the hedges. Prescriptively, you would take all of that out, but actually once you get there and you speak to someone, you would probably leave it in. So we need to have that flexibility and trust the people who are managing these sites to know what they're doing and do the right thing. I realise getting to that point is quite difficult, but at the end of the day, that is how you can actually achieve stuff. And once people take that ownership, they then keep running with it, and they'll do more and more if they're given the chance to go with it.
What would you say to him, Megan? Rather than put your fists up. No, I mean joking.
Come
Go
with
on.
me.
Yeah, okay.
Come with me.
And what would you show
Come
him?
and have a look. Come and meet some farmers. This is a farm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
because he hasn't been great at actually visiting farmers, has he? So I mean, so if you were to show him of how stuff can work, that you go from, we started off from this low point and we're now arrived at this high point. What would be your one thing you'd say, I love this, go and have a look at this and see how we've worked it? What would be your one little thing you'd take him?
What, a project that we've done?
Yeah.
God, there's so many though.
Yeah, but have you got a favourite? See, I've got hedges that I will show to MPs, journalists and whatnot and say, look, started off looking like that and now look at that and we've got this many linnets nesting and this many yellowhammers. What's that one little thing that's your golden nugget that you could go and you've got almost an elevator pitch to the Secretary of State for DEFRA? What would you go and show him?
Well, where we've taken land out of production to put in turtle dove scrapes, we call them splashes, with cultivated areas around it for arable plants, and then a nice pollen and nectar that goes up. And so this could be wall-to-wall wheat, but it's not, because they've decided that this is more important to them, and we are the most westerly range of turtle doves. So we're hanging on. And we've got now 22 of these water sources across the cluster, and it's vital for them. So it's connecting that up, and it's showing that farmers can do this collectively. We've got 29 that are all connected from Salisbury to Cranbourne to Fordingbridge.
Okay, so what you're going to show, so you've got something, Lizzie, that's done under either Countryside Stewardship or SFI, that you're going to go and show Steve Reed, say, look, this is efficacious, this works, this still needs to continue your support. What would be something that you would go and show them from your neck of the woods?
So I struggle to get away from breeding waders. We have lots of other projects as well, but I focus on that one because, well, for a number of reasons, but they're such iconic species, it's really lovely to focus on them. So one of the things we've been able to do over the last few years is sort of top up what people are getting through their Countryside Stewardship. So there's a lovely breeding wader option through Countryside Stewardship. It's fairly well paid, and it's relatively easy to do. But in order to make it really successful, there's a couple of add-ons you can do, and they're quite simple. So I think what I'd like to highlight is how that specific advice that you can give on top of those options can be absolutely critical to making it work. So all of these options were in place before the project started, and what really made them work was just that extra tweak of advice on top of it. If you put an extra ditch through here or an extra scrape there, or you maybe left this a bit longer, or if you can target your predator management in this area, and that's what really made them work. I mean, I think you get so much more for your money for those options as well. So that's what I would show, is what can be done and what can be done on top of it.
Cool. Right, well, I think we're going to wrap up, but I've got the final question to you both. So here we are at the game fair under the blazing sun. If you were going to go and advise someone coming here, what's the three things, Megan, that you're going to go and say, you've got to go and see that, other obviously than the GWCT stand, and buy a book, buy some hedges. What would be the three things that you are going to, in your brief time off here, were you going to go and see?
First, come to GWCT and sign up as a member.
Correct.
Data is key, and this is the only way we're going to get it. So come and support us. Come and have a drink and have a chat, get some advice. What else? The thing is, every game fair, I don't get very far. So this is the issue. I think just make the most of networking and talking to other people. I think sharing ideas and knowledge is really important. And just seeing some of your old buddies from at college, that's like my highlight. It's going to see some old friends that I was at college with when I was 16, and we never get time to see each other. What else could you do? I think that's my top two.
Are you going to go and do any...
Go to the pub.
Are you going to do any retail therapy, Lizzie?
Yeah, probably. Try and stay away, but I expect so.
Right.
Maybe on Sunday when the sales are out.
Exactly. Yes, let's be perfect enough. You're going to retail per day. We've already told my son that he's only allowed to even get his wallet out on Sunday, and he then came back with one of those stupid collars. My dogs never wear collars. He'd bought a collar for the dog in one of those polo belts, and it doesn't even fit him. And so he's paid top dollar for it as well. Anyway.
Oh,
there we
women's
go.
working trousers. That's what we need
Working
to
trousers.
find. We need some
Yes, because-
decent working trousers.
Do you
Some
know-
decent kit that fit a woman. would
You
be
wrote
nice.
a fantastic article in the Shooting Times about kit for women, and that was an interesting thing. You see, I could have, if I was a hackneyed journalist, I could have been asking about, do you find it really difficult to work amongst all these men as women? But clearly not.
No.
Because at the end of the day, we know that evidence, speaks for itself. And I think that, but one of the things that I do see, and it was very interesting reading your article about it, and when you sort of said, is there any way I can speak to the editor of the Shooting Times about, kit for women? It was something that just really doesn't fit on our radar. So that weird thing of the sort of, how challenging is it for women to work in farming and nature recovery and all that stuff is not at all, because we can see by them. But you can't actually buy any kit to go and work in. It's a bit more fundamental than that, really, isn't it?
I was taught at Sparshot there's no such thing as bad weather, just inadequate clothing. And 60% of GWCT is female field staff and advisory. So we do need some good stuff
Now,
too.
listen, I'm going to put this out there because we are, at the end of the day, Britain's premier, and I mean that quite sincerely, rural podcast. I mean, that's data, that is. That's actually drawn from data. That's not just my supposition. And if anyone's listening, which they will be, from that, perhaps think about having a chat with the women of the GWCT to go and say, what do we actually need in the field? And then what a fantastic relationship that would be. Because you say 60% of your field force are female. There you go. 60%. There you go. So that's it. And what a thing to end on, talking about ladies' trousers. So, that's great. That's
So
the sort of
cliche.
shit we like to do. Well, thank you so much, Lizzie. Thank you, Megan. It has been
Pleasure.
lovely to talk for you. And I told you, Megan, I'd treat you gently. Have you been gently treated?
Very.
Yeah.
And it's a great podcast. I listen to it every week.
Thank you. Buy my book.
I want a free one.